November 24, 1944. 1:45 a.m. Saipan, Mariana Islands. The tropical air hangs thick with humidity and the metallic scent of aviation fuel. In the pre-dawn darkness, colossal shadows emerge from hastily constructed hangars, aluminum giants that dwarf every aircraft that came before them. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress. Each machine stretches 100 feet from nose to tail. Silver skin gleaming under floodlights like mythical beasts preparing for flight. The sound begins as a whisper, then builds to a thunderous roar as four Wright R-3350 engines, each producing 2,200 horsepower, breathe life into these mechanical leviathans. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Morgan adjusts his oxygen mask and peers through the cockpit window of Dauntless Dottie. Beneath him, the Pacific Ocean extends endlessly, but his destination lies 500 miles northwest. Tokyo, the beating heart of the Japanese Empire. For the first time in the war, American bombers will strike the Japanese mainland from bases outside their defensive perimeter. The age of untouchable homeland security for Japan dies this morning. This moment represents more than military strategy. It embodies the collision of two industrial philosophies, two concepts of national power, two visions of what modern warfare could become. The Japanese, masters of carrier-based aviation and surprise attacks, built their empire on mobility, precision, and the warrior spirit of Bushido. They conquered territory through swift, concentrated strikes, believing that American industrial might could never reach across the vast Pacific to touch their sacred soil. They were wrong. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress emerged from American assembly lines like a manifestation of democratic industrial power, not elegant like the Japanese Zero, not brutal like the German Stuka, but overwhelming in its sheer technological sophistication. Each aircraft cost $639,000 in 1944 dollars, equivalent to $9.2 million today. The United States produced 3,170 of these giants in less than 4 years, a feat of manufacturing that staggered military planners worldwide. While German engineers struggled to perfect single-jet prototypes and Japanese factories rationed aluminum for essential repairs, American production lines rolled out 4 B-29s every day at peak capacity. The Superfortress represented everything Japanese military doctrine never anticipated facing. Its service ceiling of 31,850 feet placed it beyond the reach of most Japanese interceptors. Its pressurized cabin allowed crews to operate at altitudes where enemy fighters gasped for oxygen. Its remote-controlled gun turrets eliminated the vulnerable gunner positions that characterized earlier bombers. Most revolutionary of all, its 3,250-mile range meant American air power could now project from bases the Japanese Navy could no longer reach or destroy. As the first formation of 111 B-29s lifted off from Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, Japanese radar operators on Honshu detected unusual echoes approaching from the southeast. The returns appeared impossibly large, flying impossibly high, approaching impossibly fast. Flight Sergeant Hiroshi Nakamura, stationed at the Choshi radar facility east of Tokyo, later wrote in his diary, "The scope showed ghosts, aircraft larger than anything in our intelligence files, flying at altitudes our interceptors rarely achieved, even in training. We reported contacts, but headquarters demanded verification. How do you verify the impossible?" The Japanese military had prepared for American invasion fleets, for carrier raids, for submarine attacks. They had fortified beaches, positioned kamikaze aircraft, and indoctrinated civilians in the art of resistance unto death. But they had not prepared for strategic bombing from bases beyond their reach, delivered by aircraft beyond their ability to intercept consistently. The psychological impact of that November morning would reverberate through Japanese society more profoundly than any battlefield defeat American. Planners understood that this raid represented more than target destruction. It announced the arrival of a new phase in warfare. General Curtis LeMay, who would later command the B-29 campaign, recognized that strategic bombing could accomplish what amphibious invasions might achieve at tremendous cost. The Japanese, he reasoned, had never experienced the systematic destruction of their homeland. Unlike Germany, which endured years of Allied bombing, Japan remained psychologically unprepared for war's arrival at their doorstep. The target for this inaugural mission was the Nakajima Aircraft Company's Musashi plant, northwest of Tokyo. This facility produced engines for Japanese fighters, including the Nakajima Ki-84 Frank, one of the few Japanese aircraft capable of intercepting B-29s at high altitude. The symbolism was deliberate. American bombers would strike the factory that produced their own hunters. As the formation approached the Japanese coast, interceptors rose to meet them. The Kawasaki Ki-61 Tony fighters climbed desperately, their pilots pushing engines to maximum power in the thin air above 25,000 feet. Captain Saburo Sakai, Japan's legendary ace, later described the encounter. These American bombers were like flying fortresses in the clouds, massive, purposeful, surrounded by their own thunder. Our fighters looked like sparrows attacking eagles. We could barely reach their altitude, and when we did, their defensive firepower created walls of death around each formation. The Japanese expected to face bombers like the B-17 Flying Fortress or B-24, Liberator, aircraft they had encountered over the Philippines and other Pacific targets. These were formidable but familiar opponents, flying at altitudes Japanese fighters could reach, carrying defensive armament Japanese pilots understood. The B-29 shattered those expectations. Its 11 50-caliber machine guns and single 20mm cannon, controlled by sophisticated fire control systems, created intersecting fields of fire that made traditional fighter attacks suicidal. More shocking still was the bomber's ability to maintain formation integrity under attack. Previous American bombing raids over Japanese-held territory often scattered under fighter pressure, reducing accuracy and allowing individual aircraft to be isolated and destroyed. The B-29 formations held together with mechanical precision, their defensive firepower concentrating to protect damaged aircraft and maintain bombing accuracy. The technological gap extended beyond the aircraft themselves. American crews trained on sophisticated instruments, navigated with radar systems, and communicated through radio equipment that Japanese forces could barely intercept, much less decode. The B-29's pressurized cabin allowed crews to operate efficiently at altitudes where Japanese pilots struggled with hypoxia and cold. This wasn't merely superior equipment, it represented superior industrial capacity, superior training infrastructure, and superior logistical support. As the bombers approached the Musashi plant, Bombardier Lieutenant James Patterson activated the Norden bomb sight, a mechanical computer that calculated wind drift, altitude, and airspeed to deliver unprecedented accuracy from high altitude. Through the bomb site's optics, the factory appeared as a cluster of rectangular buildings surrounded by worker housing and transportation infrastructure. Patterson's training had emphasized the strategic importance of precision. Destroying the factory would eliminate aircraft production, but avoiding civilian casualties would maintain American moral authority. The bomb bay doors opened with hydraulic precision, and 500-pound general-purpose bombs began falling toward their target. Each B-29 carried up to 20,000 pounds of ordnance, more than twice the load of earlier heavy bombers. The sight of falling bombs created its own psychological impact on Japanese observers below. Previously, air raids meant diving aircraft, strafing runs, or low-level bombing attacks. Now, destruction fell silently from the stratosphere, delivered by aircraft so high they appeared as silver specks against the blue sky. The explosions that followed marked more than industrial destruction. they announced the end of Japan's geographic immunity. Factory workers who survived the initial blasts later described their astonishment at the precision and power of the attack. Yoshiko Hashimoto, a riveter at the plant, recalled, "The bombs fell like thunder from heaven. We had heard stories of American bombing in Europe, but those seemed like tales from another world. Suddenly, that other world had come to us." The symbolism of the attack resonated throughout Japanese society. The aircraft factory represented more than military production. It embodied Japan's technological pride and self-sufficiency. For decades, Japanese engineers had adapted Western technology, improved upon it, and created aircraft that dominated Pacific skies in the war's early years. The Zero fighter had shocked American pilots with its range, maneuverability, and climb rate. Japanese aviation seemed to prove that spirit and ingenuity could overcome industrial disadvantage. The B-29 raids shattered that illusion. Here was technology so advanced, so thoroughly integrated with industrial capacity, that Japanese engineers could only marvel at its sophistication. The Superfortress carried its own weather radar, navigated with systems Japanese aircraft lacked entirely, and operated from bases supplied by a logistical network that spanned the Pacific. This wasn't just superior equipment, it was superior systems thinking, superior integration of technology and strategy. The recurring symbol throughout this transformation was the silver aluminum skin of the B-29 itself. Japanese aircraft, constructed with increasing amounts of wood and fabric as metal became scarce, appeared crude beside these gleaming giants. The aluminum represented American abundance, not just in raw materials, but in the industrial capacity to refine, shape, and assemble those materials into complex machines. While Japanese factories recycled cooking pots to make aircraft parts, American factories produced aluminum bombers by the thousands. That aluminum skin also symbolized transparency, the openness of democratic society that Japanese propaganda had portrayed as weakness. The B-29's design philosophy emphasized standardization, mass production, and systematic training, values that reflected democratic society's faith in education, planning, and collective effort. Japanese aircraft design prioritized individual pilot skill, mechanical simplicity, and warrior spirit. The contrast revealed competing philosophies of warfare and society. The immediate tactical results of the November 24th raid were modest. 24 B-29s reached the primary target, causing significant but not crippling damage to the Musashi plant. But the strategic impact exceeded all expectations. Japanese military leaders recognized immediately that their homeland defense strategy required complete revision. Citizens who had been assured of their security behind the Pacific Barrier now understood that American air power could reach them anywhere. Anytime, Emperor Hirohito, upon receiving reports of the raid, reportedly asked his military advisors, "How many of these aircraft do the Americans possess?" The answer, thousands with hundreds more rolling off production lines each month, highlighted Japan's strategic dilemma. Even shooting down every B-29 in the initial raid would barely dent American bomber strength, while Japanese fighter losses were becoming irreplaceable. The psychological transformation extended beyond military circles. Japanese civilians had endured rationing, blackouts, and increasing restrictions as the war progressed, but these hardships seemed temporary, sacrifices necessary for eventual victory. The B-29 raids introduced a new reality. The war could come to them, directly and systematically. The immunity purchased by geographic isolation and naval superiority had ended. American air crews experienced their own transformation during these early raids. Many had trained for years, anticipating the day they could strike at Japan itself. The actual experience of flying 1,500 miles over open ocean, navigating by celestial observation and dead reckoning, then facing concentrated fighter opposition over enemy territory, tested their skills and courage beyond previous limits. Staff Sergeant William Thompson, A gunner aboard Sweet Sue later wrote to his family, "Flying over Japan feels different than bombing Germany or Italy. Those were enemy territories, but they were still European, somehow familiar. Japan looks alien from 30,000 feet, like we're bombing another planet. The cities are laid out differently. The landscape seems older, and you get the feeling you're seeing something no American was ever meant to see." The technical challenges of operating B-29s at maximum range pushed American logistics to new limits. Each aircraft required 7,000 gallons of aviation fuel for a round trip to Tokyo, fuel that had to be transported 6,000 miles from American refineries to Pacific air bases. Spare parts, ammunition, and replacement crews followed the same vulnerable supply line. Japanese submarine commanders recognized these logistics as targets more valuable than individual bombers, leading to a campaign of attrition that tested American industrial capacity. The Japanese response evolved rapidly after the initial shock. Fighter tactics adapted to exploit the B-29's few vulnerabilities. Head-on attacks that minimized exposure to defensive guns, ramming attacks by pilots prepared for death, and coordination with anti-aircraft artillery to force bombers into predetermined kill zones. The Nakajima Ki-84 Frank and Kawasaki Ki-100 fighters, introduced in late 1944, could intercept B-29s at high altitude, though Japanese pilot training and fuel shortages limited their effectiveness. More significantly, Japanese aircraft designers accelerated development of jet-powered interceptors, rocket-powered point defense fighters, and guided surface-to-air missiles. The Nakajima Kika jet fighter and Mitsubishi J-8M rocket interceptor represented Japanese attempts to leapfrog American technological advantages through radical innovation. These projects, while ultimately unsuccessful, demonstrated Japan's recognition that conventional responses to the B-29 threat were inadequate. The strategic bombing campaign's escalation through late 1944 and early 1945 reflected American confidence in the Superfortress concept. General LeMay's decision to switch from high-altitude precision bombing to low-altitude incendiary attacks in March 1945 represented a fundamental shift in strategy, one made possible by B-29 technical capabilities and Japanese defensive weaknesses. The March 9–10, 1945 raid on Tokyo, which killed an estimated 100,000 civilians and destroyed 16 square miles of the city, demonstrated the B-29's capacity for devastation beyond anything Japanese leaders had imagined possible. The 334 bombers that participated in that raid carried 1,765 tons of incendiary bombs, more destructive power than many previous campaigns combined. The sight of Tokyo burning, visible from 100 miles away, marked Japan's entry into the age of total warfare. The recurring symbol of aluminum took on new meaning as the campaign intensified. Burned-out B-29s, shot down over Japan, became monuments to the technological war's human cost. Japanese civilians, examining the wreckage, marveled at the bombers' sophisticated equipment, radar systems, pressurization machinery, and fire control computers that represented industrial capabilities beyond their experience. Even in defeat, these machines testified to American abundance and technological sophistication. The psychological impact on Japanese society deepened with each raid. Children who had been taught that American soldiers were weak and undisciplined now witnessed daily evidence of American organizational efficiency and industrial power. The B-29 formations appeared with clockwork regularity, maintained precise bombing patterns under fire, and demonstrated systematic approaches to target destruction that contradicted everything Japanese propaganda had claimed about American character. This transformation in perception extended to Japanese military leadership. Officers who had dismissed American industrial capacity as quantity without quality now confronted evidence of technological superiority across multiple systems. The B-29's integrated design, pressurization, defensive armament, bombing accuracy, and operational range represented systematic engineering. The Japanese designers struggled to match with limited resources and disrupted research programs. The final symbol emerged in August 1945 when B-29's Enola Gay and Bockscar delivered atomic weapons to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. These missions represented the ultimate expression of strategic bombing doctrine. Single aircraft delivering unprecedented destructive power from altitudes that ensured their survival. The atomic bombs themselves weighed less than conventional bomb loads, but their impact exceeded anything delivered by hundreds of previous raids. The irony was inescapable. Japan, which had launched the Pacific War through surprise attacks on sleeping targets, found itself helpless against American surprise attacks delivered by aircraft flying openly in daylight. The technical sophistication that enabled atomic delivery, precision navigation, reliable aircraft systems, and crew training reflected the same industrial democracy that Japanese militarists had dismissed as weakness. Emperor Hirohito's surrender announcement on August 15, 1945, specifically referenced a new and most cruel bomb delivered by enemy aircraft. But the atomic bombs were merely the culmination of a strategic bombing campaign that had already demonstrated American ability to destroy Japanese cities systematically. The B-29 Superfortress, more than any other weapon system, had made Japanese defeat inevitable by projecting American industrial power directly onto the Japanese homeland. In the war's aftermath, captured Japanese documents revealed the profound impact of strategic bombing on civilian morale and military planning. Diary entries, military reports, and government communications consistently emphasized the psychological shock of facing an enemy whose industrial capacity seemed limitless. The sight of B-29 formations approaching Japanese cities had become a daily reminder of national vulnerability and technological inferiority. The transformation was complete. Japan, which had entered the war confident in its spiritual superiority over materially advanced but spiritually weak enemies, surrendered to an opponent whose material advantages reflected systematic, democratic approaches to problem-solving. The B-29 Superfortress embodied those approaches, not just advanced technology, but integrated systems thinking that combined research, development, production, training, and logistics into unified strategic capability. The silver aluminum skin that had symbolized American abundance throughout the campaign became, in memory, a reflection of democratic society's capacity for collective effort. The B-29 was not created by individual genius or warrior spirit, but by thousands of engineers, workers, and planners collaborating across an entire continent. Its success represented the victory of systematic organization over individual heroism, of industrial democracy over military authoritarianism. The epilogue to this story extends beyond 1945. The B-29 Superfortress established precedents for strategic aviation. It shaped the Cold War, the nuclear age, and modern concepts of global power projection. Its technological innovations, pressurized cabins, sophisticated radar, remote-controlled defensive systems, became standard features of subsequent military aircraft. More profoundly, its successful employment demonstrated that democratic societies could mobilize industrial resources for sustained technological competition. The Japanese, in their defeat, learned lessons that would reshape their post-war society. The recognition that industrial capacity and technological sophistication mattered more than warrior spirit in modern warfare led to Japan's transformation into a peaceful, technology-focused democracy. The aluminum that once fell as bombs from B-29s would later form the skin of Japanese commercial aircraft, built in partnership with former enemies and reflecting shared commitments to peaceful technological competition. Though B-29 T-29 raids of 1944-1945, thus represent more than military history. They embody the collision between two worldviews, two concepts of national power, two visions of technological development. The outcome demonstrated that democratic societies, despite their apparent inefficiencies and internal debates, could mobilize resources and coordinate efforts on scales that authoritarian regimes could not match. The Superfortress, gleaming in Pacific sunlight as it approached Japanese targets, carried within its aluminum frame the promise and power of democratic abundance, a promise that would reshape the post-war world and establish patterns of international relations that endure today. The thunder of right. R-3350 engines, echoing across Pacific skies in November 1944, announced not just the arrival of a new bomber, but the dawn of an age when technological superiority and industrial capacity would determine the fate of nations. In that announcement lay both warning and hope. Warning to those who would challenge democratic societies, and hope for those who would embrace the collaborative spirit that made such achievements possible.